Hey everyone, so welcome back. We're going to get started with chapter 7 and 8. I've combined the two chapters so that they are one because they're super easy and there's only a few things I really want to talk about regarding our chapter 7 and chapter 8. So let's go to the PowerPoint, and I'm going to spend the first part of the PowerPoint just going over some of the basic things that are covered in chapter 7 and 8, and then we'll move on to the handouts. So to begin with, chapter 7 and 8 is basically a synopsis of our lab class. All right, so don't freak out because you see some of the same terms in these chapters as you did in lab, because, well, hey, they're the same thing. So we're going to be going over the gross anatomy of the skeleton. So to kind of get started with this, remember that our skeletal system is going to do a couple of things. It has a couple of functions. It provides a framework for our body. It attaches to muscles so that muscles can move. And then the components of the skeletal system consist of our bones, cartilage, ligaments that attach bone to bone, and tendons that attach bone to muscle. So these are the basic components of the skeletal system. In lab, we only really did the bones, right? We didn't talk about cartilage, we didn't talk about ligaments or tendons, maybe a little bit of cartilage, but not much. Then we talked about in lab all of these anatomical bone terms. So things like the condyle and the process. For this lecture class, I am asking that we know the four big ones. So you need to know what a condyle is. You need to know what a process is. So remember, condyles are smooth, articulated bumps at a joint, at an articular surface. Processes are anything that sticks out as a projection. And then I also want you to know a foramen, which is a hole. Any hole through a bone is a foramen. And then a fossa is that thumb imprint or depression. So I want you to know these four. The other ones, we learned some of them in lab class, like the tuberosities, a knob on your humerus, and the trochanters are knobs on your femur, epicondyles and tubercles and that kind of stuff. But I'm going to test you on the four that are in red, all right? So make sure that you know those. Now, next slide is going to discuss the two main parts of the skeleton. So we've got two main sections of our skeleton, the axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton. The axial skeleton consists of the skull, hyoid bone, vertebrae, and ribs. This is chapter 7. Then chapter 8 is the appendicular skeleton, made up of our arms and legs. So it says limbs of our upper and lower body. And then our girdles. We've got our pectoral girdle, that's the clavicle and scapula. And then we have our pelvic girdle, which is made up of the two os coxae. Remember that we have a total of 206 bones in the body. Make sure you know that it's on the test. So we have 206 bones in our body that make up this axial and appendicular skeleton. So we put those together and we get our complete skeleton. Now, what we're going to do with our handouts is I am just going to focus on a few things with our axial skeleton for chapter 7 and a few things with our appendicular skeleton, chapter 8, that we didn't really talk about in lab. So with the axial skeleton, I'm going to go over a couple of handouts regarding our skull and spinal column, and then we're going to have a few handouts on the rib cage and that kind of stuff. And then we're going to move to the appendicular skeleton, spend a short amount of time with our arms and legs. Just a little bit of information that was not covered in lab. All right, so fun stuff. That's what this is. So if we get back here, let's go to handout handout 7A. And handout 7A is going to discuss something with the skull that we haven't talked about yet. So I'm going to put it up here, kind of zoom in on it. And we're going to talk about the skull's sinuses. So once this is in focus, I'm going to get rid of me. Let's see, here I am. Goodbye. And let's talk about the sinuses. We have a set of sinuses in our skull. There are 4 sinuses. So we've got the frontal sinus, the sphenoidal sinus, the maxillary sinus, and the ethmoidal sinus. Now, our sinuses are going to have certain functions, and this is what we need to know, okay? So the functions of our sinuses is to decrease the weight of the skull and to act as a resonating chamber. Now, a resonating chamber, and you know, we actually talk not only out of our mouth, but out of our nose. And so if you ever wonder about this, well, just plug your nose, and you can see that I'm not resonating the way that I should, okay? So if I plug my nose, my resonating chamber is compromised because my sinuses are going to allow me to resonate. And so when I resonate out, I'm actually using my sinuses as well as my mouth, right? Okay. So the resonating chamber, and you know, think of like an elk bugling. They are resonating out to produce the sound. This also, these hollow bones, these sinuses, are going to help decrease the weight of our skull. So our skull is not so heavy. You know, when you're all stuffed up and you have a cold, your sinuses can be plugged. You know, so if your frontal sinus is plugged or your maxillary sinuses, you just feel that pressure. Makes your head feel huge. Makes your head feel heavy. It's because those chambers are filled with fluid, mucus, and it's making us feel uncomfortable. All right, now I just named the sinuses here. So we have the frontal sinus in the frontal bone, the maxillary sinus in the maxilla, ethmoidal and sphenoidal are in the ethmoid and sphenoid bones. All right, so these are our sinus cavities. So that word is cavity. So this takes care of our first handout. And, you know, real simple stuff. So this chapter is really simple, and I'll see you for the next handout. All right. Take care.